All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to our monthly info session about the MLH Fellowship. I see you all joining in the chat right now. Lots of folks from India. We got some folks from the west coast of the U.S., the east coast of the U.S. We got some folks from Mexico. Super duper exciting. And I'm also pleased to bring on stream my colleague from the UK, who some of you may know. None other than Will Russell himself. Here we
Hello,
are
hello.
to put on a show for you all today. Thank you all for joining. We're super excited to share a little bit about our upcoming fellowship program, particularly focused on the fall semester. I would say as the presentation is going on, please feel free to drop questions in the chat, and we will highlight them as we go along, and there'll also be a Q&A section at the end. But also know that we may answer many of your questions throughout the presentation. So I'm going to try to work as many of them into the presentation as we reasonably can. All right, awesome. So why don't we, with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with introductions for any of you who don't know who we are. So first things first. I'm Amanda. I am the head of the admissions team here at the MLH Fellowship. Before that, I had a bunch of jobs before that. Most recently, before MLH, I was the director of admissions at a coding boot camp here in the United States called Flatiron School. Some of you might be familiar. And when I'm not running admissions teams, I'm a giant nerd about all things. I have Star Wars nerd up here because I was jazzed about Obi-Wan, which I'm still pretty jazzed about. But I also just finished Elden Ring, which was a ton of fun. Yes, I know I'm really slow and old. And I'm obsessed with my two cats. So please enjoy the picture of my two little fur children. Will, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Excellent. Well, thank you, Amanda. Hello, everybody. My name is Will. As Amanda said, I'm based out of the UK. Very cool. I help run our program operations and make sure that you, as a fellow, can have the best experience possible, making sure that everything happens at the right time. Previously, before I was involved in the fellowship, I used to help organize hackathons all around the UK and be really active in the hackathon scene here. And so kind of getting to do some of the stuff I learned from that to help more people is pretty awesome. And Amanda called me Boating with Boatface. I like my boats. If you like water sports and generally vibing on the water, say hi in the chat.
Will told me when I first met him that he enjoyed going sailing, and I imagined this like very sedate, calm thing, maybe with like a glass of wine in his hand. No, that's not it at all. That is 0% the kind of sailing that Will does. It is badass. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do in today's info session. I'm going to start and I'm going to take us through a section on just sort of what is the fellowship, where did it come from, why do we even run this thing, and if you are an aspiring fellow, what kind of outcomes can you expect? Where do our fellows typically end up? Then I'm going to hand it over to Will for the meat of the presentation. And our focus for today is, it says here sort of how the program works, but really what this is about is like a day in the life of a fellow. We talk a lot about the time commitment and what you'll learn in the fellowship, but really, how are you spending that time? What does it look like to be an MLH fellow? How can you imagine yourself in the program? So that's going to be a huge part of today's presentation. We'll then do a little preview of what to expect with fall admissions. I'll share some of my top tips on how to be a successful applicant, and we'll do some Q&A at the end. So that is our focus for today. Will, do you want to stay on stream while I do my bit, or do you want to pop off for a second?
I'll pop off and I'll, interact with the chat while you're talking.
I love it. I love it. Teamwork. All right, cool. So if you've been to one of these info sessions in the past, you might be familiar with the story of the fellowship. But fundamentally, the fellowship is about bridging, just like everything that MLH does, it's about bridging technical knowledge and theoretical expertise built in sort of traditional computer science education spaces with the practical experience that one needs to actually be a developer out in the world? How do these algorithms and these data structures and these concepts that we're learning actually turn into working projects and full pieces of software? And MLH really tries to bridge that gap for folks. We've been around since about 2013, and in that time, we've touched thousands and thousands of people's coding experiences. In our most recent survey, we found that 1 in 3 of all new US programmers, everybody graduating with a computer science degree or new to the field of computer science and software engineering, were or are part of the MLH community. So we've spent all these years, almost a decade at this point, building this community of young developers and people who are new to the field. So, what better way to do that? We've been doing that with our hackathons for a very, very long time. And now we're doing it through the fellowship as well. The fellowship, for those of you who are less familiar, is a 12-week remote internship alternative for technologists. It is an opportunity to, as it says here, learn production level skills, work in open source, earn a stipend, access mentors, particularly more senior engineers at some really top end tech companies. We'll talk about some examples in a few minutes. In many cases, earn academic credit and ultimately help you land a job in a field. And really, the fellowship came about from seeing a gap in serving our community and wanting to find a way to put our strengths behind getting folks these skills. So you may all remember a little thing called the COVID-19 pandemic. Turns out it's not actually over, but we do know when it started. It started back in early 2020, and very quickly upon that happening, we realized that internships were getting canceled left and right. Companies were, closing down the doors or canceling summer internships and whatnot. And we realized, hang on a second, we have this incredible community of young technologists who are all looking for opportunities because their internships have been canceled. We had this community of partners that had been working with us on the hackathon side for years and years and years, introducing their technology to young technologists. So we said, you know what? Why don't we put these two things together and make a program? And that is how the fellowship came to be. And as it says on the right side of your screen there, the fellowship is where technical knowledge meets practical application. You come and bring your passion for technology, your knowledge of how to code, and your vision for how to build great software, and we give you the tools to turn that into practical application. I don't think we have this statistic in this slide deck, but one that I've heard is about half of all people who become MLH fellows make their first production level pull request within the program. This is their very first time committing code to an open source project or a production level project of any kind, which is pretty exciting. And because of that, we're really able to sort of add some rocket fuel to our fellows' careers. So this is one of our alumni of the program. Her name is Anne. She was a fellowship student after having really, been largely self-taught. She didn't go through a traditional computer science degree. She skilled herself up on her own. And she realized upon becoming a fellow that the MLH fellowship was really a way to open up her job search and really get noticed. Having MLH on her resume, having Meta on her resume in particular, because she was a fellow that was matched with Meta, really just opened up doors for her that might not have been opened otherwise. And she's now very happily employed as a software engineer. So this is how the fellowship can provide value for you as a fellow. In addition to being a terrific learning opportunity, you have the opportunity to work with really well-known brands in the tech space. You have the opportunity to put MLH on your resume and open up opportunities that you might not have been able to in otherwise, if you will. Here are some other just stories. We have folks who have landed all kinds of different roles, not just software engineers. We have some SREs in there. I believe we have some graduates who have successfully gone on to become data scientists. You can really take the practical knowledge that you learn in the fellowship and apply it wherever you're looking to end up in your career. So let's talk a little bit about how it actually works. How do we get you from this place of, I have all of this conceptual knowledge and theoretical knowledge, but I need to show employers and I need to show myself that I have the practical skills to know how to actually use this. So let's spend a good chunk of time now talking about what goes on in the program itself. I'm going to bring Will back on stream here just to say hi. As I talk us through just the broad, like big picture details of how we put a fellowship semester together. So there's sort of two streams that have to come together in order for the fellowship class to work. One is we need you all, we need fellows. That's this part down here where we gather applications and screen for skills. We'll talk a little bit about the specifics of the admissions process in a little while, but know that right now we are running this process for the fall semester. You can also apply for spring and summer, but we haven't really started reviewing for spring and summer yet. Fall is what we're focused on. So we are gathering applications for the fall and screening those applications for folks that might have the right skill set to be great fellows. At the same time, we are working with our partners, some of whom include, GitHub, Meta, GitLab, Solana Labs, places like that, to say, all right, what kind of fellows are you looking for this semester? And what kind of projects do you want them to work on? So we look for fellows who have the skills, we look for partners who have the projects, and then when we have both of those things together, we can start matching based on skills. I think I saw a question in the chat about, have we started matching for the fall yet? Not yet, but likely soon. We'll share more about the timeline for matching in the coming slides. So now I want to turn it over to Will to talk a little bit about how do you spend your time as a fellow? What are the things that you're really focusing on? And when we say, you're going to spend 30 or so hours a week as a fellow, what are you even spending that time on? So Will, over to you. Walk us through a day in the life of a fellow.
Excellent. So this diagram you see on the screen right now, this is just an example. It varies from fellow to fellow to pod, just due to the nature of how flexible the fellowship is. But hopefully this will give you some sort of rough idea of what you could expect as a fellow and the sort of experiences you might have. Now, currently in the MLH fellowship, we have a daily stand-up on a Monday and a Wednesday, followed by a retrospective on a Friday at the same time. And this is a really good chance for you to meet with the other fellows, discuss any things you might be stuck with, and kind of help them debug as a team, as well as just have some fun. Fellows have some good conversations. It's really just a good chance to get to know everyone and kind of bond as a team. So you'll have this. Now, this may be at the beginning of your day. It may be towards the end of your day. We have stand-up times at different times. Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, because you'll understand why I asked you this, but it's 2 p.m., 6 p.m., and 10 p.m. GMT are the times that we're running our stand-ups. Thank you, Amanda.
Got that right.
I have been known to get it wrong in the past. That's why I double-checked. So they are the stand-up times that we are currently running. So some people, they do it like in the evening. So 10 p.m. GMT is 5 p.m. Eastern. So maybe that'd be like after your day at school. Some people do it at the end of their day. So they do the stand-up the other way around. So the stand-up could be at the beginning of your day, but it doesn't really matter. It will have a check-in at some point. And for example, at MLH, my stand-up with the team is at 3 p.m. So there you go. There'll be a context. So after your stand-up, after you've discussed with your pod leader who's there to help and support you and help you understand what's going on, you'll, potentially other activities will happen, such as maybe you're stuck with something and your pod leader is willing to jump on a pair programming session with you, or another fellow's like, I know something about that. Let's work together. So maybe you'll spend 30 minutes or so, or maybe an hour doing a pair programming session during the day to make some progress on the project that you're working on. And later on, you might encounter a live seminar. So during the week, we do live seminars throughout the program on all sorts of topics. We do like interview and kind of career preparation, as well as like panels from guest speakers, talks on technical topics like introduction to GraphQL was a popular one we've done, introduction to Docker, all that kind of stuff. And these are optional, but they're really recommended. And fellows normally get real value out of these, where they can ask questions to industry experts on what they should do and how they made the decisions they made to get to where they are today. So they're really, really cool. And I'm not going to lie, I quite enjoy going to them as well. They are really quite fun. And those are things that happen kind of during the week. Some days they'll happen, some days they don't. We have a calendar of all of that for you. Now, for the rest of the time, you're going to be working on your project. That's what you're going to dedicate the rest of your time to. Now, it's important to mention that this is async or asynchronous, which really means kind of on your own terms. It's not the same way you're on a meeting or you're in an office and you're working 9 to 5, right? The beauty of the fellowship is you can make this work around your schedule. So let's say that like you have some, I don't know, an appointment or something or other commitments that mean that you can still do the 30-hour-a-week commitment, but you might have to like, do some in the evening, some in the morning, and kind of make it work around your schedule. So key thing to note there, even though it's synchronous, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's lonely. You'll be able to interact with people, right? We have Discord where fellows ask questions, they interact. Trust me, the fellows have better meme taste than I do, so hopefully that's something that you'll be able to contribute to. Normally, programming memes, I do steal a few of them and send them to my friends at home. They quite like them as well. But yeah, even though the fellowship is very async, there is a lot of community going on online inside of Discord. Not just because not just outside of the Zoom meetings on Discord as well. And typically, fellows work in a team. So for our projects, we'll normally have 1 or 2 fellows, maybe even more, working on the same project. And so you end up interacting with those people a lot just in the nature of you're working on the same stuff. Sometimes you'll be working on the same contributions, sometimes you'll be working on different contributions, but it's a really good chance for you to be able to kind of get to know those people really quickly. I know Amanda and I are big fans of working asynchronously when we can, but it is important to make sure you have those meetings and stuff. So as you can see, there are like recommended and required meetings, which is like one-on-ones with each other, pair programming, the info, not the info sessions. That's what we're on now. The live sessions we have with guest speakers and so on. So that's kind of the beauty of the fellowship. So yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, can you talk a little bit about, we were talking about fellow outcomes, right? And people who are able to take the fellowship and turn it into a job opportunity. What are the things that we've like built into the program that help it be a bridge to a job? What is it about the fellowship that sort of gets you ready for that first or your next job in software engineering?
Yeah. So one of the things that you'll notice, because I know a lot of you watching today are students, and typically as students, right, you have lectures all the time, you've got deadlines all the time, and it feels like a little bit like universities deciding what you're doing rather than you being the decision maker there. You're being told what to do and you're doing it. One of the things you'll notice as you jump into a professional career is that there's a lot more kind of responsibility of managing your time and being your own kind of self, where you're going to own what you're doing and make sure it gets done right. People aren't going to be kind of like watching over you like a parent, right? Making like you're a little baby that needs babying, right? They're going to be giving you the trust to get on with your job and do it properly. And that's kind of where the fellowship is, this nice bridge between university and starting your first job in software engineering, because you get a lot of that trust and a lot of that kind of responsibility to begin with, but not all of it straight away. So it's not too overwhelming, but you kind of get to like warm up into it. And we've definitely seen from our alumni, when people go and land jobs, they kind of just like naturally fit into the job really quickly, because they're already kind of used to how that flow works, right? And how to get support, ask people, get to know people they don't know. That's a big one as well, right? All the fellows on the first like kickoff call, they all look at each other like, I have no idea of anyone on this call, and give it like 2 weeks, they're all like sharing the best memes with each other. And it's the same with starting a new job. It's scary, you don't know anyone, and maybe they already know each other, and so it can feel a little intimidating, but the fellowship helps them build their confidence up to ask people for help, ask people for when they've got questions and all that. And on top of that, we have the career preparation stuff as well, which is kind of like we're adapting as we do the program, but there's chances to kind of learn about like what it's like at companies through those panels and talks like we discussed. Amanda, anything else you think we could add there?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the thing that I was hoping you would highlight, and you did, is the idea that when you are out in the world as a professional working as a software engineer, you'll be in charge of your own schedule. You will have, maybe if you're lucky, a weekly meeting with a manager to make sure you're sort of staying on track, but it's largely up to you to make sure that you're staying on track. And the fellowship is trying to create that bridge of
Yeah.
experience to giving you a chance to try that out and sort of taste test that and make sure that you have the skill set to actually identify, what are the important issues here and what can I get done in a week and how do I prioritize my time and so on.
Yeah. To kind of add to that
Oh,
quickly,
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
your pod leader, right? They're going to be there to help you and make sure you're getting stuff on time, but they're not going to be like, you need to be doing this at this time and this at this time, and basically planning your day. Like Amanda said, right? You're at the end of the day, you're the one who decides how you're going to solve the problem, right? And if you need support doing that, the pod leader's there to help you. But you kind of get the support, you get to the freedom of learning how to do it, but the support's there when you need it. So it's kind of a nice balance.
Cool. So I know you already kind of talked about the daily stand up and like when it is and how long it is. I'm wondering if you could go in just a little bit more as to like how do you typically spend that time? What should fellows expect walking into a stand up?
Yeah, absolutely. So, stand up, as the name implies, is supposed to be quite quick. I don't know if you're not familiar with what a stand up is. The idea is that a team will share updates on what they're doing, any blockers they have, and they'll do it standing up because last time I checked, people don't like standing up for very long. I definitely don't. So, the idea is that people are pretty quick at their updates because they want to sit down. Now, we don't make people stand up for our stand ups, but they are 15 minutes long. And so the idea is that your pod, which is typically 5 to 8 people, come together 3 times a week, 2 of those for the stand up and one for a retrospective, which is a little bit longer and a bit more of a chance to delve into some of the things you've been encountering. And the idea is that you'll share kind of what you've been working on, any blockers that you might have had, and kind of like what your priorities are really for the day. So the idea is that you'll get that chance to discuss with others in the pod about anything you might have had issues with, and it just is a good chance to mean that every few days you'll have a chance to kind of ask questions that might be easier to discuss on a call than maybe in Discord, or have that open discussion. And if your pod leader thinks that it's worth you having a further discussion, like, hey, this problem you're encountering sounds weird, let's debug it together, you can kind of just grab them, they can grab you straight after stand up, and you can have that conversation if you need it. So it's a really good chance for the fellows to kind of understand how everyone's doing, but also a chance for them to help each other really and get help from the pod leader. So that's kind of what to expect from a stand-up. Yeah, Mando.
Yeah, and I feel like we were discussing this just the other day when we were talking about some of the fellows who are currently in the program, which is building the skill of knowing how to ask questions and knowing how to ask for help. I think we find, or this is something that you and I have talked about, that folks sometimes think, oh, I can't ask a question, I'm supposed to just know this stuff, and given that this is an educational experience, I'm sure we don't expect people to know everything. So can you talk a little bit about what it means to ask good questions and be able to sort of critically assess your own work?
Yeah. At the beginning of the program, trust me, fellows are not great at asking questions. And as the program goes on, right, pod leaders will help them understand like how they can get basically the answer they're looking for by asking the right kind of question. We've all been there, right? We've all been there where a good example would be my first internship where I was working on some complex Python stuff. I didn't really understand what was going on, and I was bad at asking for help. And as a result, I spent a lot of time frustrated and confused because I didn't ask for help. Because of these stand-ups, where you're kind of almost prompted to ask for help, which helps you initially kind of get confident in asking for help. But then it makes you realize you have this sudden click of, oh, people aren't going to judge me if I'm stuck or if I'm having a problem. And if it is a silly problem, we'll just laugh about it and continue our merry day. I've definitely made some silly problems, and I can look back and laugh on them now that they've happened. But the idea is that you get that confidence to ask questions and learn that it's okay to ask questions. No one's going to judge you for asking them. Yeah, hopefully that answered answered that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually a really good segue into the next part of the fellow experience that I was hoping you'd highlight, Will, which is being able to work with actual maintainers at some of these companies. So, what does that tend to look like? And how can fellows expect to work with professional engineers throughout their experience as a fellow?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in our open source program, and to be fair, our production engineering one as well, in a slightly different sense, the companies that we work with have people who are working with the fellows directly. And so I'm going to use open source as an example here, but as we got on the screen, we've got someone from G Research. G Research is one of our partners. They're awesome. We like G Research. And basically, their team every week will have a meeting where it's a chance to discuss kind of like the progress that you've made, whether that's just you or other people working on the same stuff. Maybe there's 2 or 3 of you. And it's a chance for you to work with the engineers to get feedback on your code. So not only are you working on code that's going to be used by people all over the world, but you're getting feedback from experienced engineers who can really help you understand, like, you may think that your code works fine, but they really help you understand how you can make it production ready code. And just by doing that every week and having those 1-hour conversations where you get a chance to really understand what you can do to improve and ask them the questions. It's not often that you get a chance to speak with an experienced engineer. You get the chance to ask these questions to them where you can really build your skill set over the 12 weeks. It might seem a little intimidating from day one. It can be a bit scary, right? Speaking to these maintainers where they're a bit like, oh, well, I don't know, what should I ask? But you get to build a nice relationship with them as you work with them. And they're just as excited as you are about the stuff you're going to be working on. So it's really nice to see that shared interest.
That's fantastic. And so last but not least, the biggest, you were talking earlier that like the biggest chunk of time you're spending as a fellow, yes, you're meeting with maintainers, yes, you're meeting with your pod leaders, but really you're contributing, you're identifying issues, you're writing code, and you're making pull requests essentially. So can you talk a little bit more about just like how fellows like that aspect of the experience? Like how are you spending your time when you are working independently or asynchronously in the program?
Yeah, so funnily enough, being a fellow, it's not all about writing code. You're not writing code all of the time. There are different kind of elements to it. And I love this little GIF that Amanda's put on the screen. Definitely gets a thumbs up from me. Anyone else like it in the chat? I like it. But the idea is that you'll pick up a issue typically, right, from a GitHub repository. You'll be working on that. And as you work on it, you can ask questions to the maintainer to get feedback. Make sure you're kind of following the right direction. And then you get to the point where you've got something that works. It kind of does the thing they ask, and you submit it for review. Then you kind of wait to get some feedback. And while you're waiting, maybe you're starting to work on something else. Maybe you're attending some of the live seminars. There's other things you can get involved in. And then you'll get some feedback from them, which gives you a chance to kind of like reflect, learn how you can kind of improve your code, and you can continue. So you might have a few issues on at the same time, especially while you're waiting for feedback on one, you can work on the other one, which is quite standard in software engineering, is to work on multiple things at once. So yeah, that's kind of the idea of like what you'll do in that async time. And a lot of those code reviews can happen like directly on GitHub, where people will comment line by line, a bit like a Google Doc if you leave feedback. So yeah, that's kind of a glimpse into what that looks like there. Oh, and to add, eventually, hopefully, if it all works, it will get merged into the final code base, and you'll have a bit of code working in production. Maybe it'll be used by hundreds of thousands of people all over the world. Maybe it will help a company do some really cool stuff. Who knows? It will really depend on the project that you're working on. Regardless, it's going to be cool. I can guarantee that.
Excellent. Well, I'm seeing lots and lots of good questions in the chat. I'm saving a bunch of them for us to come back to at the end of the session. But for now, I want to take all of this. We've been talking sort of hypothetically about what it could look like to be a fellow. Let's narrow that down and talk a little about what it's going to look like to be a fellow this fall. Who are our partners going to be? When is things starting? What's going on? So let's first do just a sneak peek at what some of our partners might be. So what you see on this slide is just an example of some of the companies that have worked with us and have sponsored fellows in the past. We've got some major logos up here, as you can imagine. Meta's working with us. They've worked with us. I think every is it every semester of the fellowship, Will, or at least every one in the last year, right? Yeah.
They've been around since day one. Yeah. Day zero, if you want to be programming about it. Sorry, I'm going to stop with the programming.
They used to call themselves Facebook, if I'm not mistaken. But
sorry,
now they're Meta.
If you want to be like that, yes. Technically, we only worked with Meta since like the end of last year, because Meta didn't exist. Thanks, Amanda.
You know what you're gonna get from me, Will. But we've got Meta on there. GitHub has been a partner of ours since day one. AWS has been a longtime partner, and I see some folks in the chat excited about Solana. Solana is one of our biggest partners in 2022. Throughout the course of the year, they're sponsoring, what is it, 100 fellows to build their blockchain and Web3 experience. Really, really exciting. So we really see the partners and the projects in the program come from three different kinds of companies. We've got big tech, what we call sort of our lesser known gems. They're not big tech labels, but they are, leaders in their individual spaces. You have Memorial Sloan Kettering here in health tech, Royal Bank of Canada and G Research and fintech, for instance, as well as what we call our sexy startups, our VC-backed startups that are growing like gangbusters and are really, really just looking for talent. And I am happy to announce that this fall we are adding yet another big tech logo to our partner collection, if you will. And Google will be sponsoring a handful of fellows, at least one pod, if I'm not mistaken. So that's about 8 or so fellows who are going to be matched to Google. May even be more than that when all is said and done. So we're really, really, I see some excitement about that in the chat. We're really, really excited about that one. We expect our fall semester to host about 120 fellows. It starts on the 19th of September, which is a Monday, and graduates on December 9th. And we have all of our tracks open and accepting applications right now. I know there were a bunch of questions in the chat about, are applications open? Is there still time to apply? We'll talk more about the full calendar in a minute, but the answer is yes. Applications are still open. There's still time to apply. And for those of you who are asking, Google is actually going to be running on our production engineering / site reliability engineering track this fall. So we're looking for folks who are interested in learning that skill set. Whoa, that lit up the chat. That's exciting. Love that. So let me share with you a little bit of the behind the scenes about the admissions process. I saw a lot of questions there. Folks absolutely still have time to apply. If you have already applied, hopefully this will answer some of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat about how the whole process works. So you start by filling out the application, which I think many of you, not all, but many of you on this call have already done. And that application immediately goes into application review, where we are looking at, we're reading your essays, we're making sure that you sort of understand and know what it is that you've applied for, right? That you have the right level of technical experience, that you fall, and that you would be eligible for one of these partner matches and so on. And if that goes well, we then also look at the code sample that you submitted. And actually, Will, I hope you don't mind if I put you on the spot just briefly. We got a question in the about what makes for a good code sample. How do you, here, I'll show it on the screen.
Ooh, good question.
Pumpalock asks, what do you look for in a code sample? So I'm curious from your perspective, how would you describe what makes a good fellowship code sample?
As I said in the fellowship Q&A we did last week at Init, your project doesn't necessarily, so when you submit your code sample, what I would recommend is submit some sort of project that you've worked on. This should be a little bit more than like just like a little tutorial thing that you followed, something that's a little bit more unique. Maybe you thought of a cool project. The example I like to use is funny story. When I was at university, a friend of my friends and I were learning to cook, and all I'm going to say is it wasn't great cooking. But we decided, why don't we make a fun competition out of this cooking? So I built a little Discord bot that could basically just keep track of who submitted what and then let us do voting. It wasn't very complex, but it kind of like was a complete project that could do something, right? A lot of people submit projects that semi-work, but they don't actually like do anything in their semi-working state. So it's difficult to kind of evaluate it fully because there's a lot of code. I could write loads of code, doesn't mean it necessarily works together. And so some sort of project that can kind of do something. And something like a Discord bot is a really good example of something where it doesn't have to do loads to be useful, right? You don't have to build like, Facebook from scratch. That's not what we're asking. But I'd recommend something that's kind of practical and demonstrates the skills that you have. Doing stuff like, DSA questions and stuff like that, they don't necessarily demonstrate that you can build something, completely. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be super complex. Don't get me wrong. I'd recommend, maybe like a little game or a little like web application that can do a few things, maybe store some data in a database. Maybe it doesn't even do that. But yes, that's kind of like what I would recommend. If anyone has any kind of follow-up questions on that, do let us know in the chat.
So it sounds to me like the most important things for a code sample are that it's code you wrote yourself. It's not a tutorial or a school assignment or something like that. It's something that you came up with that showcases your creativity and your abilities. Doesn't have to be huge and super complicated, but it does have to be something you can speak to. And it helps if it's something that you enjoyed building and can get excited about, because one of the first things your interviewer is going to ask you if you get to that point is, tell us about this project. Like, what was interesting about it for you? Like, what were the problems that you solved? And the more you can get into the nitty gritty of it with your interviewer, the more interesting things you'll have to talk about and the better that interview is going to go. So speaking of interviews, let's
actually just quickly before you hop ahead. Someone said, would a sorting algorithm visualizer do? This is an interesting one. A sorting algorithm on its own, not really. It's very algorithmic, doesn't really like do anything in a wider context. However, a visualizer that's able to sort of demonstrate it, now that does have the potential. Obviously, I can't make the decision without seeing it, but that's a good example of where you've taken the concept and you've turned it into something a bit more real world. So hopefully that's helpful. Anyway, I'll carry on, Amanda.
No, that's great. Super practical advice for the people in the chat. That's super important. So assuming that goes well, assuming you wrote a good application and you sent in a good code sample, you'll be invited to the first interview, which is what we call a behavioral interview, which is to say that is not a coding interview. It is more about again, sort of getting to know you as a person, understanding your motivation, answering your questions about the fellowship, and so on. If that goes well, then you'll be invited to a technical interview where you will review with your interviewer that code sample that you submitted, and again, explain your design choices, talk about constructive criticism and things like that. And then last but not least, if all that goes well, you'll basically, what those of you who have been in the chat and are saying, I haven't heard back, what's going on? It's because you're sort of sitting in this final dot here, this like final decision dot, if you will. And what I mean by that is you've made it through all the steps of our process. The last thing we need to do is match you to a project. And that requires two things. That requires you to be a great candidate, and that requires us to know what our fall prospects are actually going to be. What are the projects that we're matching to? If you are a brilliant C++ developer, for instance, but we haven't yet finalized any projects for the fall that rely on C++, I can't admit you because I don't want to admit you to the program and then have to say, oh, sorry, we don't have any projects for you. That sort of makes nobody happy. So for those of you who've been asking, I've seen some questions in the chat. If you have applied, if you've made it through your interviews and just haven't heard anything in a while, it is likely because we are waiting for projects to come in that would be a good fit for you. No one yet, just to be clear, no one has been admitted to the fall semester as of yet. I expect we will start admitting people in the next week or so. But again, I can only admit people to projects that I know about, and we are still getting project ideas in every day. For those of you who were excited about Google just a minute ago, we just started talking to them. Like, we literally just asked them this week, like, what are the projects that you want us to match to? And we're waiting for their answers. So I can't match anybody to Google yet. I don't know what they're looking for. So I promise we have not forgotten about you. Will can tell you, I make a huge pest of myself every time our fellowship team meets. Like, hey, do you have those project details? Do you have this project? I have to match people. Can you get me those project details? He's nodding, so you know how much of a pest I can make of myself.
Amanda, trust me, she wants to match you as much as you want her to match. Like, she wants to match you as what would you say? She wants to match you as much as you want her to match you. Yes. So that was complicated. But
I promise it is my
me.
job to get back to you as fast as I possibly can. As soon as we have finalized project details, I will be able to start admitting people for the fall. I promise. So let's very quickly go through some of my favorite tips for how to be a successful applicant. Even if you've already submitted your application, many of these will still apply to you. So the first one is, and again, for those of you who have already applied, you already did this, which is apply early. If you know you're interested in the program, there's no reason to wait until close to the launch date to apply. We get most of our applications 2 months or more before the program actually begins. So for a September program, we have half of our applications in by mid-July, which is right now. So if you've already applied, you're already in that first 50%, which is a really, really good place to be. Don't delay. If you are thinking about applying, the right time to apply is right now. Give yourself maximum time and flexibility to get yourself into the program. The second thing about your essay, or your application, I should say, is spend some time and really invest in your essays and tell us your story. Those of you, I saw when we were talking about our partners, I saw people going, "Ooh, Solana," or "Ooh, Google," or "Oh, that's so cool. Memorial Sloan Kettering, that's so cool." If you're excited about a particular kind of code, and a particular kind of development, tell us about that. Here's a perfect example. We have applicant 1 and applicant 2. Who would you rather talk to? The one who had a whole story to tell about their lives, or the one who was like, meh, I don't have anything I feel like telling you.
Trust me, it's really hard when 1,000 people say, "I want to become a fellow because I'm passionate about writing code." It's like, thank you, but I need some more. Like, how do I pick between 100 people if they all say the same thing? So
Yeah, and that's really the idea here, is that you are showcasing what makes you unique. And here's a really, really good example. This is a fellow who applied to our spring fellowship, who was already passionate about Solana and passionate about blockchain. And so this person wrote an entire essay about how excited they are to potentially work with Solana, and actually submitted a code sample that it works in the Solana ecosystem. And if I'm reviewing applications and I'm like, who's going to be a good fit for Solana? Well, this is a really, really good way to get my attention, right? And to get the Solana team's attention, and to impress them, and to impress MLH, and get yourself really a deep, deep look. So don't be afraid to share the thing that you're most excited about. I promise it is the thing that will make your application unique. And then a word of I guess encouragement, I hope, is that it's not easy to get into this program. And that's not so much because our bar is so high. It's more simply because we can only admit as many fellows as we have seats for the program. I said a couple of minutes ago, Google is looking to sponsor somewhere between, say, 8 and 10 fellows. There could be 100 fellows, 1,000 fellows in our pipeline who would be good fits for Google, but Google wants to sponsor 10 fellows, and so 10 people will be admitted into that program, which is tricky. Wow, I said Google a whole bunch, and my Pixel phone lit up, and it was like, "Can you, like, I'm sorry, did you need help with something?" I'm like, "Can you calm down, Google." I don't think my Google little assistant here yet knows what kind
Amanda,
of
just stop
matches we're going to be
saying the G
making.
word. It's just gonna make it. You're making the problem worse.
Oh, it's fine. Everything I say just goes into their AI reader anyway, and so it'll just make them smarter about knowing things about MLH at the end of the day. Anyway, all that shtick aside, the important thing here is that if you are someone who has tried to get into the program before and were not successful, or you're worried you're not going to be successful this time, please do not take it as a mark on your abilities, or a suggestion that we weren't impressed with you. Like I said, sometimes it's just a matter of the right project at the right time. That Solana fellow had applied previously, and did not get in, and then came back, said, "You know what, I'm going to double down on my excitement about Solana and Web3 and the blockchain and all of that," and ultimately was accepted. And they didn't get in the first time. Thank you. Somebody in the chat says rejection is redirection, and that's a really, really good way to think about it. It's not us saying you're not good enough. It's us saying we didn't have the right match for you at this time. We may in the future. And so that's an opportunity for you to sort of rethink your application, rethink your, focus and your priorities, and try again with a little bit of a different lean, and maybe you'll ultimately be successful. And then, last but not least, if you're relatively new to the MLH community, haven't been to a bunch of our hackathons, or know a lot about MLH in general, one way to get your foot in the door really is to apply for our prep program, which is sort of like a mini, like bite-sized version of the fellowship. It's only 3 weeks long. It's completely free. We offer it throughout the year. Our next semester is starting in August, and then we'll be running prep semesters in October and November as well. And it really gives you a chance to build your skills, build your ability to collaborate, and give yourself a leg up on getting accepted into a future program. All right. So what happens next? I'm realizing maybe we should talk about this earlier because everybody has questions about the timeline. But this is our timeline. So today is our info session. Congratulations, you are here. I think we will have enough information by the end of this week from some of our partners to be able to start making some admissions decisions. So, like I said, nobody has gotten an admissions decision for the fall as of yet. Everybody's sort of sitting and waiting for the right projects. I am hoping that in the next day or so that will change, and I will be able to start offering seats for the fall. So that should happen very, very soon. Um, and then notice we have sort of like 2 estimated last days to apply. We have one at the end of July and another one at the end of August. That is because one of the things we need to keep in mind when we match fellows to programs is, where are you located in the world? And is a partner able to work with you if you are in a European time zone, or an Asian time zone, or an Asia Pacific time zone, or something like that? So we expect that we will have enough applications to fill all of our Asia Pacific seats by the end of July. So particularly if you're in India or Southeast Asia or someplace like that, and you really want to apply, super, super important to get your application in now while we still have some seats available. We will have another one of these info sessions in August, and I expect we will have all of our applications, all the applications that we need to fill the entire program by the end of August. So it is my very strong recommendation that if you are thinking of applying for the fall, you get your application in the early part of August. Again, that gives us a maximum amount of time to review it, match it against all of our available projects, and ultimately see what the right fit would be for you. Fall program starts on September 19th, and then, as I said, we have our 2 prep classes that are starting to come together for October and November. So I think I got to a bunch of questions that were in the chat. I did pull out a few while you all were chatting while I was talking. So I'm gonna highlight a few of those. And some of them I think are for me to answer, and sometimes, Will, I might ask you for your opinion. So the first one that I saw from a couple of different people in a couple different ways is, do you recommend taking the fellowship with part-time school? And so this gives me an opportunity to talk a little bit about the time commitment for the fellowship. This also relates to those of you who asked. I think there was a question about, can working professionals become a part of this program? Same different question, but same basic answer. So the time commitment for the fellowship is about 30 hours a week. And as we pointed out early, that's mostly asynchronous time. So the vast majority of our fellows are also going to school at the same time. Maybe they have a job, maybe they have sort of part-time work. A lot of our summer fellows are doing part-time work or taking summer classes while also being in the fellowship. But you've got to be able to commit at least 30 hours a week to the program. So if you are in a work or a school situation that allows you to do that, then absolutely you should be a part of this program, and you should feel free to apply. Again, those 30 hours, if you do the math on it, it's like 25 hours a week that you're mostly working independently and asynchronously, and only about 5 or so hours a week where you have to be in a meeting or in a training, in a session or a webinar or something like that at a particular time. Will, do you have anything to add about that?
Nope, I think you covered it perfectly.
All right, awesome. So hopefully that answers those questions. Will, I really liked this question that came in when you were talking about the stand up and all the work that fellows have to do and whatnot. Somebody asked, does it feel overwhelming for the fellows sometimes? And so I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to what do fellows say to you about like how they feel going through the program, and is it overwhelming sometimes?
Yeah. To be honest, fellows do tend to find the first couple of weeks a little overwhelming, partly because it's their first time working on any sort of like, major contribution. Maybe it's that the code base is a little bit big and complex and they've never worked on anything to that level. So it can be a little bit like, whoa, what is going on here? And so it can take a few weeks to get adjusted, right, and build up those, build up the skills you need to feel comfortable. But it is normal, right, for fellows to feel like that, right? I feel like that. I'm sure Amanda does anytime you have to pick up something new that requires skills that you don't really have. It's like, I'm not sure about this. But it only takes a few weeks for fellows to kind of get their feet and in the right place and feel comfortable doing what they're doing, right? You can say the stabilizers come off halfway through the program and they're going crazy, building all the cool stuff that they do. So the answer is yes, but I was, it's fairly normal, especially a lot of them, the ones, especially the people who do find it a little overwhelming is the ones who this is like their first ever opportunity and they've never done anything like this before. But they do ease into it and ace it just after a few weeks.
And I just to add to that a little bit, Will, I wonder if this sort of resonates with you. When I was working at the coding bootcamp that I used to work at, we used to talk about students being in sort of different mental zones. And there's your comfort zone, your panic zone, and your stretch zone. And there's this idea that like if you stay in your comfort zone and you only stay doing the things you already know how to do, well, that's very comfortable and it doesn't feel overwhelming or anything. But it also means you're not really learning anything new. And so where you really want to be if you're trying to learn and grow your skills is more in that stretch zone where you're not completely like panicked and falling all over yourself, but you're like, oh, I'm a little bit uncomfortable, but that means I'm like stretching myself. And I know when at the school that I used to work at, that's where we kind of tried to keep students. It's not the most comfortable place to live, but it is where you're going to learn the most. Would you comment on that a little bit? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, that's really true. I think students can get themselves into the panic stage quite early on. Sometimes they're, I've seen this at university too, where people go, oh, actually, this was the wrong decision. I'm not right for this. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. Trust me. No one gets past Amanda if you're not good enough. Like, trust me, Amanda doesn't make sure that, if we don't think you're ready for the program, we'll, point you in another direction, whether that's to prep or something else. And we think you're ready, then we'll accept you. It is very, very unlikely that you'll get accepted to the program if you're not ready. It's just, it can be a little overwhelming at first. And so students can get themselves into the panic zone very quickly, but, with discussions with their pod leader and so on, they get back into that stretch zone where they're like, right, this is going to be difficult, but I can do this. And with the, motivation and kind of like confidence boost from the pod as well, people, they can stay in that stretch zone and build their skills with, every now and then going into the comfort zone, but they kind of avoid the panic zone for the most part.
Awesome. Cool. I'm going to throw you, I think we have time for like maybe 2 or 3 more questions. So I'm going to throw you one question about a code sample, and then I have one about full-time offers that I'm going to take. So here's a question about the code sample, which I think is probably a pretty common situation for folks, which is what if the project I'm submitting was worked on by a team, but I contributed to it too? How should they go about describing or discussing a project like that?
Yeah, it's a good question because what you want to avoid is you don't want it to come across like you didn't do anything, but you're taking all the credit, because we will investigate and we will look into it. But what I would recommend here, because trust me, I've worked on some cool hackathon projects where I've worked on a really good part of it, but I didn't do it alone. But that doesn't mean I can't use that project. When you submit it, I believe, Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they used to be. It's been a while since I've looked at Admissions Land, but we ask you to kind of describe the code sample, explain what the hell's going on, right? Yep. And that is exactly where you should explain, hey, this is a group project, but I worked on these bits, and these bits, it made this sort of impact or had this sort of benefit, right? And you can discuss how you worked as a team, because even though other people worked on the code base, there's a whole skill in itself of knowing how to work as a team and work on the same bit of code without getting each other's way. And so, that's my advice there, is explain explicitly what you did, and we're going to focus on that in the code review. We'll use like commit messages and stuff and Git commits to work out what bits you did. If you don't have that available, it does make it a lot harder for us to know what bits you did. So try and make sure that you can kind of keep it all inside of some sort of Git server, whether that's GitHub or GitLab or something like that.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing is that you can speak to the parts that you wrote, while giving credit to the rest of the team and speaking intelligently about the parts of the code sample that you do understand. I think the easiest way to crash and burn in a tech interview is to present code that you didn't personally write as if you did, just because you were close to other parts of the project, because that's going to take you down it's just going to take you down a path of awfulness pretty fast. So as long as you're very, very clear when you submit your code sample, and then again with your technical interview, these are the parts I can speak to, these are the parts that I can't, you should be just fine. And so I'm going to send us off on a high note here. This was a question from earlier in the presentation, but I saved it because I think it's such a good one, which is, do fellows get full-time offers after successful fellowship in the companies that they are matched to? And the answer to that is often yes. I say often because it's not always true that the company that you're matched to can make an offer to everybody. For instance, Solana is hosting 100 fellows for us this year. I don't think they're going to make 100 job offers, but they might make something like 40 job offers. And so you are putting yourself in an incredibly strong position, because remember, you're already working with a Solana maintainer. You're going to be familiar with the Solana code base. You're going to be able to talk about why you're excited to work there, what makes you excited and passionate about that technology. To be a Solana fellow through MLH is a huge step up over somebody who's just randomly applying to work there, because they already know your work, they already know you're good, and they've already had a chance to meet with you. We have, in fact, we just had, this is just the first example that came to mind. We had a fellow who we matched to G Research in the spring. And they liked him so much, they made him an offer before he even finished the fellowship program. They were like, oh my God, we want to work with you. Can we please hire you like immediately? And he's working at G Research now, which was a goal of his and a goal of theirs. And sort of everybody ends up happy. So
that's why a lot of our partners work with us, right? They want to be able to find the people like you, right? Because you're awesome, and they think that you can be really awesome at their company. So
exactly,
that is kind of the goal, and it's always very cool when people get hired.
Exactly. Well, we are almost out of time, so I'm gonna bring us to a close here. If you didn't get your question answered, please feel free to check out our website. We have FAQs there, fellowship.mlh.io. And if you still can't find an answer to your question, please feel free to drop us an email, help@fellowship.mlh.io. And myself or someone from our team will get back to you. But I hope we managed to demystify some things about what it's like to be a fellow. I really appreciate all the good questions and thoughtfulness and conversation in the chat this time around, and I look forward to seeing your applications come through.
Very exciting, very exciting.
All right, everyone, have a wonderful rest of your weeks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.